towards the cloud. We're good to go.
Hey friends, it's me, Christiana Gaudet, your Tarot Fairy Godmother, with a new series for you. The series is called Who Does Tarot? And we are here to show you that lots of people do tarot. And my very first guest is my good friend, Katie Condo. How are you, Katie?
I'm excellent. I'm really excited about this. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, certainly. Thank you so much. So I think a lot of you, if you come to our live meetups and classes, you know Katie. If you've been to any of my Zoom classes, you may have met Katie. Katie is an avid tarotist. Can I describe you as an avid tarotist?
I think that would be accurate. Yep.
And, you know, we know a lot of avid tarotists. The thing that, I mean, there's a lot of things that make Katie maybe special and worthy of an interview, including your Native American heritage, including your sort of deep spiritual commitment. But one of the things that maybe could have been a barrier to you learning and using tarot is physical disability. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is you deal with and how that has made tarot a challenge?
So I have cerebral palsy with spastic quadriplegia, which means that my disability affects all 4 of my limbs. I'm an electric wheelchair user who also happens to have visual impairment. So in layman's terms, that just means I need help with anything that has to do with movement. So moving, dressing, bathing, all the things. I have the use of one hand, but as you can imagine, that makes shuffling a deck of tarot cards really hard to do. There's also the visual aspect, because unless the images are blown up fairly large, I'm not going to be able to look at a tarot deck and just immediately know what I'm looking at. The biggest barrier was definitely the inability to shuffle a deck. So I tried so many different things for years and years and years. We tried traditional electronic card shufflers. We looked into things like tarot tiles. We looked into things like tarot dice. But then about 2 years ago, I discovered software called Orphalese Tarot, which is basically electronic tarot decks and also tarot apps. The apps that I use are mainly from the company The Fool's Dog.
They're great.
They are the most, number one, they're the most accessible from a visual impairment basis. Number 2, they're the most like an actual tarot deck. You can cut, you can shuffle, you can insert questions. You can also do a free-form reading. So you can pull as many cards as you want rather than being limited to the spreads that are built into the apps themselves, which some of them are great, but like depending on the question you need to ask, you know, the horseshoe spread's not going to fit, or the 3-card reading's not going to fit. You may need a Celtic cross or a relationship spread or whatever it is. And what I love about the Fool's Dog tarot apps is that you do have that free form option. So you can read the way you want to read. And then the Orphalese Tarot takes that to a completely different level, because you can use multiple decks at the same time. You also have the option, if you want it, to have the little white book information pop up when the cards come up. So it's good for experienced readers or beginners. Wow. And it takes the physical aspect of the deck out of the equation. So it gives me the ability to, one, not have those restrictions, but also two, just be able to do a lot more than I would if I'm laying a 15 card spread out on my table, right? You need space to do those things.
Right. So, and I know in just a few minutes, you're actually going to show us
Yeah.
the program and how that works. I'm super excited for that. But I got to ask, I have two actual questions here. One is, and I remember this when I think you and I first met online, it was you asking this question of like, I'm disabled. How do I shuffle cards? And none of us had any really intelligent thing to say to you. So if anyone else has that question for themselves, we're answering that question today. But
Right.
you told me that, you know, you tried for years to figure it out. My question is, like, why? What called you to tarot? Were you studying beforehand? I mean, here you are, you know, and I'm assuming your life offers you a number of challenges that my life does not offer me. And yet you pursued tarot with this vigor. Why?
It just talked to me. Um, which I know sounds like a really simple answer to not a really simple question, but the first deck I ever encountered was actually an oracle deck. It was The Well-Worn Path by Raven Grimassi.
Mhm.
And I just, it's like it just woke. It is my way of communicating with the divine in a way that I've never really heard other tarotists talk about. I've also been an intuitive and a medium from the absolute, I mean, I can't even remember not having that connection. And I think that that does come from being physically impaired, right? It gives me more space to devote to those esoteric things because I have no agency over my physical body in a lot of ways that I'm sure people who don't experience that can't even imagine. And I think it was just my mind's way of entering into a space where I am not limited by my physical limitations.
Wow. So, okay, so you had this oracle deck. You had mediumistic and spiritual experiences from your childhood. So I guess I have a few questions there. Number one, as a child, having those spiritual experiences, how did you know that that's what was going on?
I mean, I could hear people that other people couldn't. I have a lot of, I forget the actual term for this, but I get the tingles
Mhm,
pretty frequently.
mhm.
It's an extrasensory perception that when I'm connected with the divine, I have pins and needles
Mhm.
throughout my whole body, but ironically, particularly in my legs and in my spine. So that's how I know when I'm hooked in, because I have sensations in places where even though I have full sensation in my body, it is very rare for something to come into contact with these parts of my body.
Right.
You know, I use my hands a lot. I'm not getting up and walking around and touching the floor and all these things. I don't have impact on my legs. And so when I open a circle and I'm receiving a message, whether it be from tarot or directly from spirit, it's like the switch goes on and I all of a sudden have sensation in places where I don't typically have sensation.
Wow, that is super cool. Okay, got it. Got it. So can you tell us a little bit about your Native American connection in terms of ancestry and in terms of how that is part of your divination practice?
So I am 25% First Nations and I come from a tribe called the Mi'kmaq. That's spelled M-I-M-A-Q if anybody wants to look it up. I am Indigenous on my father's side. I should mention that another big piece of this was the loss of my dad. Because I was raised in Catholicism, which has this idea that when someone departs this plane, you're cut off from them. And when I lost my dad, I just said, no way is that the truth. Because I'm not going to be able to function without this person in my life. He introduced me to the sweat lodge ceremony at the age of 11. And I've always had really intense experiences in sweat lodge because it's a place where the barrier between spirit and us is super, super thin. You go into that space to do exactly that, to commune with spirit, to receive messages, to cleanse yourself of whatever needs cleansing and take in whatever needs to be taken in. And the sweat lodge experiences since my father's passing have been absolutely insane. Every chance he gets, when I'm in any kind of spiritual space, and you know this from personal experience, my dad steps up and talks to me in almost every reading we have. He's just waiting for us to open the door.
Yeah.
So he was my first guide that I ever really had true. I mean, I was having daily commune with my dad from the minute he left, to the point where I would have the same dream every night where we would walk in the woods together and just talk about our days. And then when I entered my first year of college, I became exposed to tarot actually through a friend of mine who practices Celtic paganism, sort of like a green witch kind of modality. And so she introduced me to the well-worn path from Raven Gramassi, and she says it's not really working for me. Well, boy, did it work for me, man. It just took off. It just became the language through which spirit most easily communicated for me. Later on down the line, I ran into Reiki, and that has just boosted my tarot tenfold. Because Reiki is what I use to open the channel, right? The tarot is just the language through which the messages come. And so you asked particularly about my native spirituality, and tarot is not something that we typically would use. Not because we think that it's invalid, but it just doesn't, it's not in the structure.
Mhm.
But I was able to find 2 decks that were centered in Native spirituality that really spoke to me. The first was the Spirit of the Wheel Oracle deck. And then the second was the Vision Quest Tarot.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And I just fit tarot into the spiritual practices that I was already doing, such as smudging, you know, you do this in your practice too, the calling of the 4,
Mhm.
the corners or the pillars, but we call the 4 directions.
Mhm.
And I was using that to commune with spirit and pray. And then I brought tarot into the mix and it just blew up. So not only am I using my native spirituality, I'm also using the Eastern traditions of Reiki and the Western tradition of tarot. And the way that I've been able to develop my spiritual practices is by using all 3 of those things simultaneously. The Reiki itself has enabled me, because I'm qualified for distance Reiki, it's enabled me to cast circles without the physical act of casting a circle, because that's difficult too, right? If I want to set a circle with like the 4 elements or incense or whatever that, fill in the blank, I need another person to do those things for me. And you know better than anyone that bringing someone else's energy into your circle is not always the best idea. So then what I ended up doing was getting into bringing in the elements through essential oils. I found this lovely woman. Her name is Vanessa, and her Etsy shop is Sacred Will Divine. And she uses essential oils to bring in the elements. And the thing that first drew me to her is she does this thing called 4 directions oil. And what that is sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco oils all combined as one. And those, if you know anything about Native spirituality, those are the 4 things that you need to smudge. And she combined them all in the same oil. And so I can use it, one, in a diffuser. So if I know that I'm going into a space and I'm going to be spending the day in sacred practice, then I put that smudge oil in my diffuser and it goes all day. The other thing she developed was oils for each element. So if I feel like I'm unbalanced and I need earth or fire, which are the 2 elements that I don't have easy access to because I can't light a fire and I can't just put my feet on the ground, I use those oils. And I also have the fire and the water. So I use those oils to balance myself. So this whole journey has just been trial and error and sort of finding really unconventional ways to get what I need from my spiritual practice. And tarot is one of those things.
Wow. So, the thing that really strikes me there is just the perseverance, the strong calling, and then the perseverance to pursue that calling, even though it's difficult. And I think that is so, I mean, honestly, I guess you could say, well, you don't have a choice. When spirit calls, you got to do. And if it's hard to do, you still got to do. And that's true, not just for you, but for all of us. But I also know that in other aspects of your life that I think are also spiritually led, but not as esoteric, you are also called, I know that you are getting ready to start grad school very soon. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
So I am pursuing a master's degree in social work from Simmons University, and my main goal is to advocate for others living with disabilities and make sure that we receive the services we need. But right, my goal, my overarching goal is also to heal that gap between able-bodied and non-able-bodied so that we can bloody well understand each other in ways that we don't right now. I've been living with my disability from the moment that I have had a conscious thought. I've always known that I had to do things differently than others who I was surrounded by. And tarot's no different, right? Like, I just explained that entire odyssey to you. That is 10 years of my life. And all of that just fell into place like less than 3 years ago. You know better than anyone that I'm going on all cylinders now. I was not going on all cylinders. I was really limited by my physical limitations. I could not do something that I was spiritually called to do because I don't have non-able-bodied terrorists.
Right.
Right. I am sure that they exist because I do, but I have not been connected with, you talk about the fool's journey all the time. Man, was this the fool's journey? Because I was doing it by myself.
Sure.
I did not know what to do. And it's as simple as having access to tarot books, right? If it's not in an audio or electronic format, I can't read it.
Right.
A lot of tarot books are that. They're books.
Right.
That's why I'm so grateful for the way that you've designed your community, because a lot of how you teach tarot is conversation. And so barriers that would exist in traditional methods don't exist because I'm attending a YouTube class or a Zoom class. And so you've had to transmute those materials into things that can be passed electronically.
Sure.
That I otherwise would not have access to.
Wow. Wow. That's so cool. Because all of that I did just sort of, that's always been my teaching style, is very conversational. But honestly, we should thank the pandemic for that, because pretty much all of it, I was just doing in person until the pandemic. And then suddenly there was Zoom for me. I had Zoom before that, but I wasn't doing Zoom teaching. And then YouTube. Now I've been doing one digital meeting every month, for a decade on different platforms, but bringing it to YouTube was really the thing. And that was born of too many trolls on Facebook.
Well, and I found you on a meetup group.
So now I have to know, which meetup group?
The Connecticut Tarot Circle.
See, now, okay. See, this is like such a divine thing.
And Nick, can you imagine if I didn't?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
And it's so funny because I'm only in Connecticut. I'm from Connecticut, but I'm only in Connecticut here and there. And starting that meetup, because I already have 3 meetups in Florida, I had to do Meetup Pro, which is expensive. And you know, like it took a lot for me to do that meetup, where it's only like once a year that I do an in-person thing in Connecticut. But I was like, no, this is important. I need to do it. I don't know why I need to do it, but I need to do it. I need to do it. I need to do it. So clearly you were one of the reasons I needed to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Now you know why you needed to do it.
Right?
Because man, I landed on you and I was off like a rocket.
Fabulous, fabulous.
Um,
So show us, if you don't mind, how you read tarot. Show us what you have found that that allows you to work with the cards.
Okie dokie. So this is the software. It's called Orpheus Tarot.
Mhm.
And literally I just Googled like electronic tarot decks or something because I was like, this cannot be this hard for the rest of my life. If this is something I'm called to do, then you need to give me a way to do it.
Absolutely.
The other piece that I didn't say in the beginning that
Mhm.
is great about Orpheus Tarot is that people upload their decks, and I do have some physical decks. I have about, I think 10 now,
Collection, yeah.
because I at first was very drawn to the physical act of tarot.
Mm.
But what's great now is that with Orpheus, I can play with a deck without buying the deck. I can play with a deck. I can make sure it works for me. I can make sure I connect with the messages of the cards. And it is the best.
Wow. Wow, that is fabulous. So show us a thing.
So I am going to go ahead and do my Tarot Fairy Godmother's favorite spread.
Yay.
Because I have a thing to do that.
Oh my gosh.
If I can find it, that would be good.
There we go. Look at that. I see. Wow, that's amazing.
And it's shuffling for me.
Okay, I see it shuffle, and there it is. Wow.
Okay, and then if I hover over a card, you get what it is, the position, and then if you scroll down, you also get the book's interpretation. Now I can turn this off or keep it on depending on who I'm doing it with.
So this is good. Like for those of us who interact with you when we're doing classes on YouTube or on Zoom, and you're pulling cards, this is how you're doing it.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's why it's harder to keep up in like global tarot circles.
Sure.
Like I can't do those flash
right
readings because it's I'm not fast enough.
Right.
Because of the physical limitations to be like, I pulled this for you. But that's why I love like the actual classes because it's a lot of it is discussion based. And we're doing our own personal exercises and being like, this is what I came up with.
Right. So I love here that your final outcome is the Ace of Wands, which is just like this whole birth of your path.
Yeah, me too.
Your calling. And I think obviously this is happening for you in so many ways, between school and your tarot studies. You are really just on fire these days, Katie, aren't you?
It feels like it. Yeah. And I think tarot was the catalyst for that. Because I was so bound by limitations and struggling against the fact that from the age of 10 every single institutional setting that I have entered, whether that be a school or a government program or whatever it is, I have always been the one who enters it first. I'm the person who, I'm the only person who has my particular set of conditions and barriers.
Wow. Do you think that that is by some spiritual design?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it happens too much to not be. I mean, even with you, we're entering into the mentorship relationship, and you're like, well, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. And yeah, I know.
Well, it's true. You are, in all the people that have studied with me privately, you are the first one who has had these sorts of limitations. Although I have to tell you that in the work we've done together so far, I have not, like, I haven't had to tailor anything specifically to you. And I think it's because, not only because you're like smart and you are capable, but also because you have found, Orphalese and the Fool's Dog that allow you access to tarot. Now, I have a quick question for you, though. There are those people who are very, very connected to the physicality of tarot, to gotta touch the cards. And I mean, I know that's not a thing because I do most of my work for clients on Zoom or on the phone where they're never touching the cards, and yet I can still read for them. So I already know that while there is power in touch, there is power in energy, and energy is everywhere. But what would you say to a person who's like, yeah, no, electronic tarot isn't a thing because you have to be able to touch it? Now, obviously, that's an ableist viewpoint.
Right, exactly. That's where I would start. You're not even thinking about people that have different situations and can't access these cards. Secondly, that's just garbage because we've been doing energy healing and energy work for thousands of years. The idea that we can't transfer that to an image of a card is absolute hogwash. But I will say that I do love being able to access the physical cards. I mean, I own decks because I was physically attracted to a deck of cards. And I don't mean that in the romantic sense, obviously, but like my first encounter with tarot was a physical deck of cards.
Right.
Like, I get it. I can't do it. So I don't care though. I invested in energy work specifically because I had physical limitations that I couldn't figure a way around. So I went and found Reiki so that I could spread my energy wherever I needed to spread it.
Which is clearly, with this Ace of Wands here and your final outcome, you have only just begun to spread this energy and spread it far and wide. So you shall.
Yeah, and you do your rants. This is one of those things that I could rant about, right? Because there's this idea that in order to do any kind of ritualistic magic, you have to have physical contact, right? You have to have the setup with the elements and the candles and the incense and part of the reason why I think it took so long for me to find my rhythm is because I was stuck in the fact that I wasn't doing it the same way that everyone else was doing it. And because I have that in so many aspects of my life, it was really frustrating because it was like, this too? I have to do this differently too? Like, are you serious? This is the thing that you're calling me to do, and this is the thing that I also have to like find a way to do. Can't something just be simple? And now it is, because I have all these tools. I mean, I must have like 30 different fool's dog apps on my phone, because I'm not like the average terrorist who can just carry around a deck in their bag.
Right.
You and I set up an exercise over the last week, and I traveled out of state. I did not have my computer to do a lovely orphalay spread for you. But you know what I did have? My Fool's Dog apps. And I made intentional choices of which decks I would install, because I'm already connected to those decks.
Right.
One from a physical standpoint, but I've also used them a lot on orphalace.
Mhm. Wow. So I guess the message is here, you know, there has been, since esoteric tarot has been a thing, there has been this conversation about, is tarot exoteric or esoteric? Is it just for the few, or is it for the all? And I have always believed that it is for the all, that there is something in tarot for everyone. And in meeting you, I understand that it's going to be different for different people. But I think this conversation with you really proves that there is a way that tarot can be literally for everyone and everybody.
Right. Literally everybody.
Yes.
Like
Absolutely.
everybody. And also, like, you and I talk all the time about how you're such a, rider weight person.
Right.
Me too. Like, I love that I can be working with whatever deck that I'm working with, and that I have a system. And yeah, like, I have had to finagle some things, but the fact that Rider Waite is a system and I could translate it to other things because there's a foundation to work from was really important in me feeling confident with tarot, because not every deck has an app, right?
Right.
I
Right.
definitely had to settle for some things.
Sure.
Orphalase has kind of improved that a little bit. And thank God for Ciro Marchetti, because when a new deck comes out, Fool's Dog is usually all over it.
Oh, yes.
And you can't go wrong with a Marchetti deck.
I
You
would
can't. And I was able to find imagery that felt good, because that has to be a thing too.
Sure.
Right? You have to actually connect with a deck. And the first Fool's Dog app that I ever had was that Vision Quest Tarot. It showed me women and men who navigated within the same system of spirituality that I do. And from people to people, even in indigenous communities, it's different, right?
Sure.
But that basic of the 4 directions and honoring the natural space is evident in all native teaching, whether you're learning from a tribe on the Southwest or the Northeast or the Pacific North, you could anywhere from Alaska to California. That is the thing that is the same. And because I found that deck and then coincidentally access to that app, I had a tarot deck that I could interact with anytime I wanted to, and that I didn't need help with. One thing that we did not get a chance to cover is that on my maternal side, I'm of Irish and Scottish Celtic.
Well, that explains, I mean, you've got the best of all the worlds, don't you?
So I have the power of the 3 and the power of the 4. And the fact that I've been able to combine those two things to find a practice that works is insane.
So is anything else you would like to share with us on Orphalese or with this particular spread that we're looking at?
So I think, let me just, yeah, you know what? Because I am big on something my tarot fairy godmother is not, which is clarifiers.
We'll have that conversation.
I don't use them for everything.
Fair. No, and
you know,
there are times when they're very necessary.
But one of the things that I love is that I can go up here to my decks and open a new, if I can find the thing, that would be good. I can open a new deck.
Oh, your decks. Oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Oh yeah, and I have a ton of tarot, like a ton of tarot.
There you go. I set up a new deck. There you go.
Where did it go? Where did it go? There it is. And I can change this if I want to a different deck, which I will go ahead and do. We will do one that I know you did a review on, which is the Golden Tarot. And then you can park your decks. So if I wanted to pull a clarifier on this death card, which is in the root position, I could pull this out and hit the space bar.
Wow, so
because it
cool.
shuffles, and you see you've got, you know,
right.
And you could even do the same deck, which I think is a pretty cool little thing to be able to do.
That is,
because you don't have to shuffle your spread back in.
right.
And you could get the same card for a different clarifying position. And it could mean something totally different.
That is fabulous. That is infinitely powerful. And I love that the Ace of Coins clarifying death, you know, death being a change, Ace of Coins being sort of this new opportunity, and interestingly, a new opportunity of physicality or finance or well-being. Very, very interesting stuff. I love it. It's like,
you know, it's sort of endless.
Yeah.
What's available. So
I love that it uses the word gather. I mean, I know that's a computer word, but it's also like, I love the spirit.
No, it's gathering your cards.
Yes.
And what's great is you can either do a timed shuffle, which is like it just stops when it stops. Or when I'm doing for a reading for other people, I set it to just keep shuffling, and then I can stop it at whatever point in the process. So the person that I'm doing a reading for can say, okay, stop.
Perfect. Perfect. I love it. All right, so can you come back to our full faces as we come to any final thoughts and say
Yes.
goodbye? Let me see your full face. There you are.
Do you have any questions that I didn't answer?
No, I'm so grateful to you for being willing to sort of share the story of your journey. I feel like, you know, what the reason I wanted to share you with everyone here on YouTube is simply that, man, I hear a lot of excuses from people. People who are like, I know that tarot would be good in my life, and I know that I could be good at tarot, but I just can't because of this, and this, and this. And I appreciate, Katie, that you are a person who you have some legitimate and real can'ts in your life, things you can't do that the rest of us can do. And yet, you can study tarot, you can read tarot, you can communicate with spirit, you can do all of these things, and you have not let anything stop you. And I just appreciate that so much. And I just want, I want that message to really be there for people.
Well, thank you. And I think the important thing that I have to say about that is, right, I started tarot because I needed a way to talk to my team and the universe and say, look, are all these things that are happening really happening? Like, because I've been communicating with spirit. The first time I did it, I was 7 years old. The first time that I can remember that I did it, I was 7 years old. I was hearing things that other people couldn't hear. I was feeling things that other people couldn't feel. And I didn't really question it. I just wanted validation that what was happening, right? You and I have, I remember in a global tarot circle, one of the questions you asked was whether or not people use jumpers, cards that jump out. And I have always been a jumper reader. Always, always, always. When I was using physical decks, I shuffle. I don't do what you do. I don't riffle because they don't jump as much when you riffle. I don't have anything against riffling, and I don't understand people that don't riffle their cards. Because how are you gonna shuffle if you don't shuffle? I'm not a riffler because of the way that I read, which is jumpers. But I also come from a place where I believe that cards are divinely guided.
Sure.
When I'm shuffling a deck, I am talking to an entity. I don't necessarily believe that the cards are that entity. I believe the cards are the voice of that entity.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too, for sure. For sure. Awesome.
That being said, different decks have different voices.
Oh, now that's a whole other conversation. We may have to do a part 2 and have that conversation, because I would love to really dive into like, and I agree, but I also sort of feel like, and I would think that you have made a clear argument here for the idea that tarot is not paper.
Oh, no.
Tarot is something that exists in the ether, and that the different images may speak to us differently. But you know, in a way, like, I feel like, okay, so the Empress figured strongly in the spread we just had. I happen to have my spiral tarot here with a very different Empress. Might
Which I
I,
love.
yeah,
And
you
I'm angry that I can't find in an electronic format, let me tell you.
got to talk to the fool's dog on that one. So when I see this Empress or any Empress, I'm going to remember every Empress I have seen. And so they may be called to mind. So all those different voices are going to speak in harmony when I see a single Empress.
Right. But I have also read where, like, take the light years, for example, that Empress is a signifier that I use for my mom.
Sure, right?
That particular Empress card.
Okay. Okay.
Whereas the Empress in, say, Crystal Visions, which I also own, by the way,
Good. I love that one.
is the Empress that I use for me.
Oh, fun.
The Empress in the Rider, the original, the 1910, the Rider-Waite-Smith, that's the Empress that I use for my grandmother, because
That's
she's,
so funny. So you could take those three cards, and I'm assuming you could do this with Orphalese.
oh yeah,
You could
I
take
have,
those
I
three
have.
cards. Oh man, so good, so good. So you can really do a lot with multiple decks.
I could take those cards, pull those specific 3 cards, because you can sort them in ascending or descending.
Mhm.
I could pull those specific 3 cards and use them all in a reading at the same time.
That's fabulous. I love that. I love that. All right, Katie Condo, I want to thank you so much for taking time to share your journey, your energy, your wisdom with us. Under any set of circumstances, you would be an inspiring tarotist. But the circumstances that you have shared with us here today, which I recognize would be, you know, are hard to imagine, as you say, hard to imagine for anyone who's not there. But the fact that Spirit speaks to you and speaks through tarot for you, and that you are on this journey with us is just a beautiful thing.
Thank you. This was so much fun. Thank you for letting me do this.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. And I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. And as I said, we may have to come back for a part 2 about the different voices that tarot has. So we'll look at that for a different time.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Okay, recording is stopped, I think.
That's not, but that's okay. I can just edit out. I can edit out after.